had this major contact event out in Florida and near Pensacola. And he subsequently, about a month later, personally offered me $2 billion to not pursue what I was doing and become part of his team.
We got 5 drones. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 miles to the west. Look at these things, man.
Because the actual truth about this is kind of mind-blowing, but everything I'm telling you is true. If you're going to decapitate the presidency and the Congress on something this important, then basically you're setting yourself up as your own entity, and you're going to operate outside the law. And if you operate outside the law on something this important, you are dangerous. So it's a very dangerous game being played. Now, most of the information on the subject is nonsense. I found out that there were covert programs that were staging alien abductions and mutilations. Everyone thinks those are aliens doing that. I said, no, it's not. The CIA special projects and some other special operations people. How are they doing it? Let me give you a date. October 1954 is when we mastered what's called gravity control. You can take an object, put an electromagnetic field, boom, and it flies, like these videos you see that the Pentagon has released and confirmed that they're real. So that was 1954. So by the late 50s, early 60s, these were platforms or advanced technology aircraft that don't use jets or rockets, highly classified. And the other reason for the secrecy, I'm going to tell you right now, is to sort of create the specter of a threat from outer space, which doesn't exist, by the way. It's totally a fraud, for the purpose of amassing more military power globally, by staging a threat from outer space. And remember, if you look at our documentary Unacknowledged, which is still up on Amazon, all the platforms, it details how Werner von Braun, who invented the rocket for Adolf Hitler, on his deathbed begged a member of my team, Carol Rosen, to expose the fact that they were planning to stage an alien attack and to look like we're under some sort of threat. And it was all a false flag, totally a false operation. And that the purpose behind that would be to amass huge amounts of geopolitical power, sort of in a totalitarian way, through military operations. So this is a little bit like the Gulf of Tonkin in Vietnam, where we staged the attack on our Navy vessel so they could expand the Vietnam War, when, of course, the American public was against it. So these sort of what are called false flag operations happen quite a bit. And what we have to be sure is that the public understands all this, but also the members of Congress and White House. So it's a very complicated problem. And if you Google this subject, I'd say 90% of everything that comes up is just nonsense, frankly. But there's a core of it that's true. And there are extraterrestrial vehicles and civilizations. There are advanced aircraft that are anti-gravity based on ET craft that were studied, flying around. I'd say probably 80% of the UFOs people see are actually ours, but they're not acknowledged. That's why we named that documentary Unacknowledged, because it's the first word in unacknowledged special access projects. And the unacknowledged SAPs are the ones that are off book, deep black, etc. And they deal with this. And this is a real problem, because in my meetings with senior members of the Senate and House, and also White House and cabinet level people over the years, as well as Pentagon folks, I mean, they are not allowed access to those projects. And if they push too hard, they get threatened. It was like in 1997, I briefed the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Wilson. And I had given him a portfolio of documents and information that I have that are in our book, Unacknowledged, if people want to see them. And he ended up, because one of those documents had the project code names and numbers from the early 90s, from Nellis Air Force Base, Area 51. So he made some inquiries, and he got hold of one of the offices, and he said, look, I'm Admiral Wilson, I'm J2. They said, oh, yes, sir, we know who you are. And he says, well, I want to be read in, which is military speak for briefed on this subject. And they said, sir, you don't have a need to know. And he said, excuse my language, he said, God damn it, how can I not have a need to know? I'm the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They said, sir, we will not discuss this with you any further. Cut the line. And then he pushed further and got threatened personally, and threatened with losing a star and being demoted in his position as an admiral. So this is the sort of thing that I've been firsthand involved with for 30 years. It's just now coming around that the American public is awakening to this in a serious way, and the Congress, to their credit, are really trying to get to the bottom of it.
That's a lot.
Yes, I would say, well, depending on where you are. Certainly if you're out in the high desert of California, if you're in certain locations where we have these assets that come and go, yeah, there's a very high number of them. Perhaps in other parts of the world it'd be lower than the 80, but we do know that these advanced technologies, or some people call them ARVs, alien reproduction vehicles, because they're man-made devices based on studying in part the extraterrestrial devices, spacecraft, are more common, and they're actually, over the last 60 years, have become more and more refined to where the average person would be completely deceived about whether it was an extraterrestrial or alien craft versus a man-made one, which is in and of itself very dangerous, because, if you look at those pilots who were, before the hearing last month, I spoke to David Fravor, who was one of those two pilots. And, as jet pilots, they were not read in on the fact that Lockheed Skunk Works or Raytheon, other corporations, had these devices that could move that way. And so, their assumption that all of those had to be alien, but they're not. So, it's a very complicated picture, only because people are forgetting that we now have in our archive 122 cases where we have shot down using electromagnetic weapons these ET craft, and I'm sure that number is much, much higher. Well, what does that mean? If you retrieve that kind of technology and you've got virtually unlimited funds and some of the brightest scientists in the world working on the problem, you're going to have huge breakthroughs from the 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way to now. And then those get turned into devices that could absolutely deceive the public about something happening that looks like an alien attack on a village in Brazil, right? You heard this whistleblower, Mr. Grush, say that whole operation was a covert human operation, staged to make it look like it's alien. So, one of the things in 1991, I had a guy deep in the intelligence community came to me and he said, Dr. Greer, if you tell the truth about this, it's less believable than the fiction we're selling. And, that really is true, because the actual truth about this is kind of mind-blowing. But, everything I'm telling you is true. It's not that many. I mean, it's not like every single day